Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and through you to the House. It's a sad commentary on the state of affairs when casinos, racinos, slot machines are considered economic development. Gambling doesn't create wealth, it takes wealth. It takes wealth away. Now, I'm not going to concentrate on the comments I made during the House debate several months ago, where I talked about the predatory nature of this business, about how it takes most of its profits from addicted people, how they prey on the poor and the vulnerable, how this industry uses reward cards to monitor their customers' behavior. And they do this so that they can identify frequent players. And then they relentlessly pursue these frequent players with free drinks, gambling credits, and other inducements to turn frequent players into problem gamblers into pathological gamblers, and pathological gamblers to ruin. But rather than belabor those points that I had made earlier, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking, let's call it a tale of two cities. One, Boston, Massachusetts, the other, Concord, New Hampshire. Here in Boston, we made up our minds, and then we went out, we commissioned a report. The purpose of that report was to explain the benefits of something we had already decided to do. In Concord, New Hampshire, they took a different approach. They commissioned a cost-benefit analysis before they decided. Many of you will remember that one of the reasons we often heard during the debate in the spring, that we had to act now was because New Hampshire was poised to build a large gambling facility in Rockingham on the Massachusetts border. Well, New Hampshire did their due diligence, and they did their studies, and they looked at the costs, and they looked at the benefits. So New Hampshire looked at what the costs and benefits might be to a $500 million facility in Rockingham near the Mass border, and that's comparable to the size of the facilities that we're contemplating here in Massachusetts. And they concluded that at a 39% tax, 39% of the take that the state would get, it would generate $219 million for the state of New Hampshire. Now here in Massachusetts, we're not talking about 39%, no, we're talking about 25%. So that New Hampshire facility at 25% would generate about $140 million. And then they looked at the costs. What might the costs be to government and society as a whole if they invited this industry into their state? And they concluded, took a look at the costs. They broke it out into wider social costs and costs that would be borne by government. They took a look at crime, and they said, well, that would be cost taxpayers money. Types of crime they were looking at were primarily burglary, theft, but also some violent crime. They looked at the cost of businesses and employment. The people who would bear those costs are individuals, families, the larger economy, and businesses. Those were things like increases in lost work days, lost productivity, employment termination. They looked at the cost of bankruptcy, which fall on individuals, banks, the legal system, and creditors. Bankruptcy as a result of gambling debts. They looked at the costs of mental illness, which are borne by health insurers, treatment providers, family members, and of course also the state, more so here in Massachusetts where we have an expanded healthcare network that provides mental health support where they don't in New Hampshire. And that cost is associated with mental illness such as depression and anxiety. They looked at the cost of suicide that are borne by the families. Problems with pathological gamblers is that they have a high risk for suicidal thoughts and much higher suicide rate than the general public. They looked at the cost of social services, which we all know are not nearly as generous in the state of New Hampshire as they are here in Massachusetts. So these costs would be greater here. That falls on the state. Their costs due to unemployment, welfare, treatment costs to individuals with problem gamblers. They looked at the regulatory costs. They looked at the family costs that include divorce, spousal separation, child and spousal abuse, neglect, domestic violence. They looked at the cost of abused dollars. These were borne by families, friends, employers. These are costs associated with money lost gambling that was taken from family friends, family members, or employers that were never reported as crime. And this is very common. The social connections that are broken and lost, borne by individuals, families, friends, communities. This is a reduction in social capital. And the political costs, increased concentration of economic power that'll result in disproportionate political influence of the gambling industry on the government there. And here in Massachusetts, as we embark on one of the largest expansion in government in memory, as we build this huge regulatory process and authority, which will be quasi-independent from this body, we have to worry about abuse in that system. We've all seen from the pension series of articles in the Globe about government authorities or programs that are too independent. And I'm thinking here about the parole system, how they become an opportunity for abuse and inefficiency and patronage and loss of public confidence in state government. I worry about that here. But let's go back now to the study that New Hampshire so thoughtfully provided us. Take a look at what they identified, how they quantified those costs. So at 25%, that $500 million facility may generate $140 million. They found that the social costs, both public and societal in New Hampshire, was between $35 and $60 million. But they concluded that most of the customers that would come to that Rockingham facility would come from the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts and not from New Hampshire. So thoughtfully, they provided an analysis of what the social costs might be to their neighbor to the south. Something I might add that we were unwilling to do for ourselves. And they concluded that the social cost to the state, the great Commonwealth of Massachusetts, should New Hampshire build a facility on our border, would be between $100 and $210 million. So the total social costs, both governmental and borne by the larger society, they concluded were between $142 and $275 million, far eclipsing the $140 million that they might generate with a 25% tax, and even at its high estimate exceeding the $219 million that they might hope to achieve with a 39% tax. There's obviously been a rush to judgment here in Massachusetts because when thoughtful people look at this issue carefully, they conclude that expanded gambling is a threat. It's a threat to our economy. It's a threat to our social structure. It's a threat to our political structure. This is a beast that doesn't end here, it starts here. Because in no state where expanded gambling has been introduced, has it not expanded. It is irresistible. As budgets get tight, the demand to increase gambling, either with new venues or more slot machines or expansion of existing venues, inevitably results. Inevitably results. When increased competition from the state next to us, Rhode Island, which will inevitably happen as they look to expand Newport and Grand and Twin Rivers, will cut into our profits, and there'll be a demand from this body to make up the lost revenues by expanding and increasing exposure to our people to this predatory industry. I was raised and grew up in Massachusetts. I'm proud of my state. I'm proud to represent my district in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. We've been leaders in so many areas. We've been groundbreakers. We've done so many good things that have led the nation and shown the way for other states to improve their quality of lives and their government. Today, I'm not proud. We're following a path that has led to no good in any place that's invited it into their state. I'm not proud. Today, Mr. Speaker, I'm embarrassed, I'm ashamed, and I'm sad. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Chair recognizes Mr. Bowles of Attleboro.